Hello, everyone. This was a good week of chapters with some surprising moments through most of the chapters, with One Piece and Mission Yozakura family being particular standouts for me. So we're going to be starting off with One Piece, chapter 1056, and this was a great chapter, having it that the Straw Hats are leaving, as they always do, in the middle of the night. We see everyone recovering from the battle with Green Bull, as everything seemed to work out alright. We see Kinemon was spending time with his wife, and seeing the shocking news that Carrot is going to take over the leadership role of Zoe. I had initially believed Carrot would join the crew. I thought this would have worked out rather well. However, I do understand this decision to do that, even thinking in the terms of the in-world, why Nekomamushi and Inuyarashi would decide to have Carrot do it. Mostly because Pedro had saw very high potential in her, and so did they. That's why she was in a prominent role to begin with. She was the fourth musketeer in the three musketeer group they had in the dukedom. Thus, she was a rather high position, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong on that, let me know. But from what I remember, she was the fourth musketeer, meaning she was already positioned rather highly. She doesn't think she's all that strong now, and the truth of the matter is she's not. However, she's also fairly young. She's might be as old as Chopper, if not a little younger. So they're banking on potential, and that's why they made her the new ruler of Zoe. Again, in terms of decision making, that's not the worst thing to have happen, especially as Momo is taking over Wano. Allowing a lot of the younger generation to start taking over is sort of a plot point to One Piece as a whole, as each area that Luffy visits, either the older leaders wisen up or the younger generation take over. So it's not that surprising that Inuyarashi and Nekomamushi are staying in Wano to help Momo, and the fact that Carrot's going to take over is an interesting choice, and I look forward to seeing more or less where it would go in the future, in the same way that many of these sort of decisions we won't really see, but you can have a lot of fun with. It then shows Momo is still struggling with his responsibilities, being the fact that he has the maturity of an 8-year-old. However, I imagine it'll be very much of a VV situation where he knows his responsibilities are here and plans on staying. After seeing that the Straw Hats have left without saying goodbye to him or Kinemon and Momo start panicking, looking for everyone, and eventually finding Yamato, who is ready to set sail to live the Kozuki Oden life. We'll get to see Yamato join the crew and follow in many antics that are to come. Now, I believe he will be lower than Jinbei, but in that tier, because there's the Monster Trio, the Frankie, Robin, Brook Trio, and then the Wimpy Trio, and now you have Jinbei and Yamato filling that kind of bridge gap in power between the middle trio and the Monster Trio, because those two are very powerful, but there is a little distance between the two groups and them, though it's not all that wide. The last major bits of this chapter are, of course, the enormous bombshell that Buggy is the greatest character in One Piece and has somehow recruited Hawkeye, Mihawk, and Crocodile to his crew, in a manner of speaking, the Cross Guild, which is hysterical, seeing that Buggy is basically evil Usopp in every way, shape, and form, recruiting the most powerful of people to his side with very little problem. Now, it's probably closer to a partnership, but it is still very funny to see that Buggy is reaping all of the rewards because it's his face on everything, and the fact that he's that powerful does now lend less credence that it was Shanks who orchestrated Buggy's ascension, and closer to Buggy somehow lucking his way into that position. There were some interesting facts with that, namely being that they put bounties on Marines. And I think that's very interesting and a bold thing to do. That in itself would probably have pushed Buggy high up the pecking order if that was his original idea, to give the bounties to the Marines, captains and officers. So there's some interesting developments there, as the three of them, Law, Kid, and Luffy, all are planning to leave on the same day, and each one goes in a different direction, because once they leave Wano, they're back to rivals, which is a fun way of having them continue the rivalry while still relatively being close in a manner of speaking. No, I wouldn't imagine there are any friends between them, but I could see them having that rivalry akin to Roger, Whitebeard, and Shiki. We also see that Kid does in fact have the Big Mom road poneglyph, which I think is extremely interesting, especially given the fact of what he had said prior, where he arrived, beat up a commander, and left. That clearly shows that Snacks was a complete waste and tried to avoid demotion by basically giving in to Kid, and then they made up the story that Snacks beat him. The only reason why Snacks then got demoted after losing to Kid was because he had a prolonged fight with Urouge, where Cracker had to come in and save the day, showing that Snacks was a waste. But we also learn about this man with a burn scar on his face, or a burn scar, I guess, somewhere. I thought it was on his face. And this has caused everyone to try to look at every character that's ever existed in One Piece to try to find out who this living legend is, who knows where the final poneglyph is. It's most likely a new character that we have never met before, whether it's an ancient character who's been living for a long time or something else entirely, we don't know yet. But we'll be learning something, and that should be extremely interesting, as it seems as though Robin and Law knew something about this but weren't completely sure yet. So there's a lot of intrigue going on, given the fact that everything outside of Wano is on fire and everything in Wano is finally starting to calm down. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter an A. I thought it was great seeing all the different moving parts and the continued dump of information from Buggy's unification of two great powers in Mihawk and Crocodile to join his cause, showing that that's how he became a Emperor of the Sea, as well as seeing the fact that there is now one last lead that the Straw Hats have to find in order to find the One Piece. I'm assuming that with Yamato leaving to join the crew, we'll end up getting a VV-esque goodbye, with the Straw Hats saying goodbye to Momo after they expected Momo and Kinemon to join them. Then when they say they can't, they'll say goodbye and they'll sail off onto the next adventure, which will probably be some mini one before heading towards this lead, with many others pursuing the final remnants of the One Piece and the road poneglyphs. So there's a lot of intrigue going on, and the next chapters in general are going to be insane, seeing all the different high-level enemies as well as different giant amounts of information to come. This is an exciting time to be a One Piece fan, and it's going to get even more exciting as time continues to go on. Now we're on to Black Clover, chapter 333, and this was a good chapter continuing to build up Lucius, showing just how powerful he has become after absorbing Lucifero. We see that Asta is still an anomaly and able to break through Lucius's massive time magic, and Lucius even admits as much, that he has seen the future that he wants to create, and Asta is the only thing that can stop that from happening because he is this bizarre anomaly with zero magic. So Asta confronts him after Lucius explains that Julius is dead and that nothing's going to stop him from ruling the world and making sure humans never get too uppity again. They plan on destroying humans and rebuilding them in his perfect image, and if they ever try to do anything, he would put them down as the king czar of the world. Asta, of course, plans on stopping that, even dissolving the bubble of time magic he had placed over the area. And so now Asta is going to have to go toe-to-toe with more or less a souped-up, powerful wizard king, as Lucius is going to have to demonstrate just how far above he is from anyone else in the entirety of the world. So the next few chapters should be interesting to see how powerful Lucius is compared to the other villains of this story. Either Black Clover is very much rushing to the end, which would be a massive mistake, but given everything we kind of know about how the author's health isn't quite up to snuff, I wouldn't be overly surprised. It would do the story a massive disservice, but there's a bit of an understanding there. I'm hoping it goes the prolonged route and we get to see the full breadth of his powers and get the underdog heroes to go and so on. But I wouldn't be surprised if this sort of ends sooner than we all expected. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was good seeing Lucius's plan, as well as the fact that Asta is going to have to surpass his limits and surpass the Wizard King to win this fight. Do I think he should win this fight? No. Will he? That's up for debate, as I genuinely have no idea. Now again, the rest of this story could either be very good or it could end extremely prematurely, but that's what the next few chapters are going to have to really decide with whatever they're going to do. Hopefully they don't try to prolong it only to later realize they can't, and hopefully they don't try to short-side it realizing they could have prolonged it. Hopefully they make a decisive decision. So now we're on to Mission Yozakura Family, chapter 142, and this was a great chapter showing that the real reason for this attack by Momo was to brainwash Shinzo and Futaba. We see that the bomb had unleashed small little creatures of his out into the headquarters where everyone was able to save them, but ultimately Momo had arrived on the scene, right where the main character and the head editor of the magazine was. The two of them are going to attack Momo when Shinzo stops them. This was a shocking moment, and we see that something's changed in him, and now he's defending Momo, and we see that Futaba is doing the same, defending Momo from across the headquarters and stopping the eldest brother, the head of the spy association, and her friend from going any further. This changes pretty much everything, as now they have to find a way to stop Momo's brainwashing and reclaim their friends, the two siblings, while also trying to capture Momo, which I think is an interesting touch in the fact that Momo is slowly but surely going to try to brainwash his own children to bring them to his side, leading to some more interesting fights, especially given the fact we know that these characters are insanely powerful. It oddly enough puts a more interesting twist on the I'm controlling an ally portion of things, because they all know that they have to find a way to break through to them, which is easier said than done, and it should be interesting to see how they handle it. This is one of the very few times where I've seen a brainwashed main character and not been overly aggravated by it. I don't know why. I think this is actually a really interesting decision, and I really look forward to seeing how it goes, because Momo continues to be an absolute villain here. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter an A. I thought the twist with the fact that Momo had successfully brainwashed two of his children to be an incredible decision, and I very much look forward to seeing what happens next, especially with how this fight's gonna go and how they're going to rescue the two siblings in question who are now more or less hostages in this situation. I don't think they get Momo, as much as that would be very funny if he gets captured here now. Also, to somehow get close with the rest of the family. I think he does get away, but I don't know if Futaba and Shinzo escape with him or if they save those two, but Momo escapes again. I'm not sure, but I thought this whole chapter was great, and the next few chapters should be very interesting to see who wins, in a manner of speaking. So now we're on to Undead Unluck chapter 122, and this was a good chapter revealing how the round table works. Juiz sits the two of them down, and they seemingly are planning to use the round table when Juiz decides to reveal the truth of things. What she reveals is once you use the round table, you more or less become immortal and you don't age. You're free from time. Now, this answered my questions on where is Fuko going to be placed in terms of the timeline. And it turns out the more you use the round table, the further ahead you get. So Juiz, the first time she had used the round table, pushed her into the prehistoric era, into the Jurassic era, I believe they had said, as Victor had to wait for her. her. It seems as though the new timeline is more or less pushing into the future, as God does in fact destroy the Earth, killing everyone there and just resetting everything. So that adds some real weight and consequences, as these characters are going to die here, which I think is fairly interesting, given the fact that I'm not sure if they'll be exactly the same. They might not be. It might not be a perfect one-to-one recreation. It also could be a one-to-one, so more or less nothing could have changed, but it adds this variant of doubt on whether or not things are going to be identical, and this, understandably, it does have Fuko upset to a degree, as she wanted to save everyone in this reality, but ultimately she does know she can't do that, and her plan and her justice is to try to make everyone's pain human-based only. More or less, try not to have it that everyone gets screwed over by some superpowers and some vengeful god that's destroying everything. That's her version of justice. And the reveal at the end of the chapter is that she could achieve that version of herself, as she wants to save everyone else from the suffering they've caused themselves, to others, to whatever, by using the card in Andy's head, which I think is a neat callback, that it's not just a piece of metal he's put in there, but instead it's an actual artifact called Remember, I believe. And it's going to have some sort of ability to have Fuko's desires become true in some way, shape, or form. So next chapter should be extremely interesting to see what that artifact actually does, and how this will affect Andy in the long run, because once again, Andy and Victor are the same person. So I'm curious to know what's going to happen there, as things could get very interesting. Another instance of a character death that I usually loathe, but could be executed very well here. I'm very curious at the decision made, because I could either hate it like I usually do, or I could actually think it's pretty good. Thus, maybe the trope does have some potential that I had never once seen before. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was pretty good. Seeing the truth of how the round table works, the Juize's story as well, and the fact it answered my question on where Fuko is going to be brought back to, which, according to Juize, should bring her to around somewhere in the 1800s. That should be pretty interesting to see, as Fuko now being immortal, having to live out so long, should be actually a fun adventure. And seeing as how I believe we were all a little misled on what an arc is for this, because I can't see this ending anytime soon. Not fully. We're in the final stretch of the story, absolutely, but I could see this ending in a year, maybe two, not within the next 5 chapters. Not unless some serious rushing is happening, which would be unfortunate. So I think we've got a long, decent amount of time left, and depending upon how well the anime goes, this could stretch on for a long while, given the fact that she's going to the 1800s, and I doubt they're going to have it that Ragnarok happens anytime before 2020 in universe. So things should be very interesting, and the stories going forward of Fuko learning to get even stronger than ever before should be extremely exciting. So the future of this series is still looking bright, and I look forward to seeing what is on the horizon. Now we're on to Mashle, Magic and Muscles, chapter 119, and this was a good chapter, showing more of the cheesy side of Mashle, having it that Rain and Finn reconnect and reconcile their differences, seeing as how Rain wanted to protect Finn by distancing himself from Finn, so that the dangers that Rain will be enduring wouldn't affect Finn. Finn, however, had grown through MASH to not see it that way and wanted to be more in Rain's life, in a manner of speaking, seeing as how he had enjoyed everything up until that point because of Rain, and Rain is all he has left, so he plans on fighting as hard as he can to more or less keep it that way. So, as the battle goes, Rain is going to more or less get himself killed if something doesn't change, and that change happens when Finn unlocks his second line and his second, which is some sort of healing guardian. Now, with Rain able to heal more or less to the same level that the frat guy can, the battle is a bit more even. So the next few chapters should reveal who will win. I imagine Rain and Finn, which would be the big shock of this first battle. as we haven't seen any of the others yet, though I imagine they're probably going about as well as it was with Rain, with some exceptions. We'll have to wait and see for those battles, but I think the first victory will be Rain and Finn. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was good. It was able to show some quote-unquote actual storytelling and had the two main characters of this chapter get over their problems and kind of grow together. So it should be exciting to see what the ridiculous battle to come is going to look like as the clash of two spearmen continues to go, and we see just how powerful each one truly is, as basically wounds are turned off for this next bit of the fight. Hopefully Finn has quite the amount of magic pooled up so he doesn't grow exhausted before the end of the fight. Though that would be fairly funny also if he just was exhausted after using it once, so now they're in deep trouble. Now we have Sakamoto Days chapter 82, and this was a good chapter showing what has exactly happened to the masked kid and the fangirl, having it that the invisible guy who joined Shin and Akira explains that he had received a call from his brother, the masked kid, and heard Slur's henchman in the background. We then get to see how that came about with the masked kid and the fangirl waking up in their room, stuck at the headquarters, quote unquote, of Slur and his men. As they begin to attempt their escape, they get caught and start fighting the deerhead guy. Eventually Slur catches on to what's happening and checks, even speaking to the two of them, and the fangirl seemingly switches her fandom, but not fully, as I think she still plans on escaping, though I wouldn't be surprised if she changed her mind. That is when the masked kid calls his brother in his pocket. He doesn't say anything because he's too embarrassed to ask for help, which annoys Shin, but it seems as though that is what he needs, help. And of course he does. He's in probably the most dangerous place on the planet. So that's why the invisible guy joined this impossible task of getting a hit on one of the most defensive assassins of all time, where nothing had ever hit her, even in her youth. So their task is seemingly impossible, so that should be pretty interesting to see how they overcome that limitation. So overall, I think I'll give this chapter a B. It was good seeing what the actual scenario is for the masked kid and the fangirl, as it had been just left up in the air of what happened to them after they were captured. Now getting definitive proof of what is going on with them at least allows it that each person in this little group of three has a goal of their own to achieve by finding the database. So things should get interesting, especially if the Slur agent ends up somehow joining this little crusade against this one extreme master teacher to try to find the database, only to sabotage it and succeed in his mission. So there's a lot of moving parts here, as well as Sakamoto still running around trying to do his best to find the database. So there's a lot of moving parts, with each of the three having their own motivation, from the invisible guy trying to find and save his little brother, Shin trying to prove to be a good partner to Sakamoto, and Akira trying to find her family member. So a lot of interesting bits, and the next few chapters should be exciting to see how they plan to achieve the impossible. So that was all of the chapters. They were all very good, with different insane moments happening in pretty much each one, from One Piece revealing Buggy's godhood, seeing as how he was able to recruit two absolutely fan favorite powerful characters, to Black Clover showing Lucius's insane amounts of power, Mission Yozakura having a very huge twist of Momo showing off his mind control abilities, and the betrayal of Futaba and Shinzo, Undead revealing the truth of the Round Table and its consequences, Mashle having it that Rain finally accepts Finn, and Sakamoto having it that the teacher character that they're trying to attack is borderline unstoppable and unbeatable, showing that older characters in Sakamoto are the most dangerous characters. So now we have everything else, and I'll be starting off with My Hero, which I thought was fine, and I think the Bakugo death is boring because it defines Bakugo as a mid-level, low-end character. Basically, having him get killed off just doesn't do anything. It's a bold-ish move by a character we thought was important, but ends up being nothing more than a low-tier character. He didn't do anything through the series. Wasn't a real rival, wasn't overly important. He was fine. Horikoshi seemingly wanted to make us believe he was important, but he wasn't really anything at all, unless this ends up being a fake out. Eri arrives, saves Bakugo, and he ends up being the number 2 hero. But ultimately, no matter what decision is made, I think it was just rather poor. Maybe that's just me hating, I don't know, but I was really uninspired by this choice, and we'll see how well it ages in the coming chapters. Jujutsu Kaisen was fine, Blue Box was fine, and Earthchild was fine. Aliens Area was good as they continue to fill out the world and explain some of their equipment, which was a fun, neat thing to show. I also had forgotten that the main character was actually younger. He was just finishing high school, so it makes him like 17, 18. For some odd reason, I thought he was older, so it was actually a pseudo refreshing to see that he's actually still very young. So that was interesting, seeing the equipment at work and how they work to a degree. Super Smartphone was good as the main character continues to unravel the mysteries of what he plans on trying to do to reveal who the real villain is, as the big guy does in fact reveal the truth about the superphone, which then causes the superphone to kind of explode. So we find out how that works, but it looks like you can kind of get a hint and then retract it and kind of try to back it off, because it did the same thing that when the other guys sort of figured it out did. Like, it started to distort, but they didn't seemingly believe it any further, so it kind of fixed itself. Where this time he fully revealed it to the fullest extent and it exploded. So the police are seemingly protecting the big guy, but it looks like things are not going to go well for him, as the main villain has more or less infiltrated the prison, the jail that he's in. So we'll see next week what's going to happen there. Doron was good as we see the main villain's full powers on display, beating just about everyone. I'm curious how far this still has to go, if it's going to keep rushing at this high level scale, or if it's going to slow down at some point. P times 6 was good as we see Mimin begin to play her piece for the battle and see that she plans on playing it her way and trying to help as many people as she can, because that's just what she does. And she wants to help her rival, and it seems as though some of the others are realizing that maybe the rival should just give up her crusade of being bad and kind of just accept Mimin, and she'll be happier for it. So there are a couple of interesting things going on here, and I look forward to seeing where this eventually goes. And the Elusive Samurai was good as we see the main villain group getting prepared to march towards our main heroes' eventual place they plan on taking over and trying to stop them. We see that the main heroes are still full march ahead and even gaining allies with the reveal of the main character's true lineage. So things are getting more exciting there and should continue to be exciting from here till the end of this beginning battles. So that was all of the chapters. It was a particularly good week of chapters in my opinion, as everything really hit very well, I think. Next week is seemingly off, so we'll have to wait a week, but I'm assuming the next few chapters should be extremely exciting nonetheless. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and as always, thank you for watching.